Please keep eating. But I would like to not interrupt your mood, but I would like to introduce Antoine Guéhenno, who is one of the representatives here of Fondation TF1. Antoine, we've become friends over the years, and I'm so glad you're here. We can't thank you enough for your support of this program over the many years at this point. It's wonderful. We're so grateful to TF1 and to you for coming here personally to participate in this award. Our Immigration Journalism Award has now become one of my favorites. The stories that we hear are absolutely heartrending. Please come up and say a few words.
Thank you very much, Alan, for these kind words. You know I'm a newsman, and so I start with the news, ladies and gentlemen. We are the day after, 2 days after, and I must confess that when I was preparing my speech, I wrote two names, Trump and Clinton. And I knew then I would have to delete one. So the American people have made their choice for the next 4 years. I have no comment to do about that. But during the presidential campaign, we saw that immigration once again has been at the heart of the debate. Moreover, in 2017, it will be the same thing in France between the potential candidates for presidential election. All the reports in competition this year for the Immigration Journalism Award show that this question remains the burning issue of our societies today. All the reports have captured the difficult daily reality of men and women risking their lives to simply survive. As you know, I represent TF1, which is the leading television network in Europe. And diversity is one of the priorities of the TF1 group and also of the TF1 Foundation. TF1 Foundation managed by Samira Jouadi, who is of course with us today. And thank you, Samira, for all your support and work. This foundation was set up to promote diversity inside the TF1 group, not just for the news department, but for all departments of the group. Basically, we welcome young talents who have not had the opportunity to benefit from all the advantages of life. They spent 2 years inside the company, and some of them stay with us after. Last year, I spoke to you about a young man, Bala Fofana, who worked for the group thanks to the TF1 Foundation. This experience helped him to join one of the major French newspapers called Libération. Samira and I are, of course, proud that the foundation has participated in his success. Despite the exceptionally high quality of the report this year, one of them has stood out. Not only by the story itself, but by the moving way it has been written. I think that this nomination is especially fitting when we consider that the winner and her family have also experienced the adventure of arriving in a new country. As the writer herself once said, when you have been forced to leave your country, you never feel totally at the right place in your new country. So I'm very pleased to award this year's prize to Doan Bui for an article entitled The Pianist, published by L'Obs, a French news magazine. The article tells the story of the exile of a talented young pianist in Syria, and one day the Islamic State burned and destroyed his piano because it was apparently the music of the devil. When this happened, he knew he could no longer stay there. Now I'd like to ask Doan Bui to join me and tell us more about the meeting with the pianist.
So first, I'm very proud and very honored to be here now today with you. I want to thank you from all my heart, the Fondation TF1, the French American Foundation, for giving me this award. As you said, it has a special meaning to me, as my parents were immigrants, so they also fled their countries. And also I've been following this immigration issue for a long time, but it's just only recently I made the connection why I was following the immigration issue. I guess I was like, refusing the reality and seeing us and then I wasn't really realizing I was like, doing my own analysis by being a journalist. First, I must confess it's a very strange time also for me to be there. Yesterday I was in the street of New York with the people protesting against the election of your new president. And one of the slogans was, we won't build the wall, our hands are too small. And the fact is I understand this, but being a journalist, I'm afraid we are coming towards with more and more walls. I've seen those walls during my journeys. I've seen the wall between Greece and Turkey. I've seen the wall in Hungary, for example, the new wall between Hungary and Serbia, and it's especially striking when you imagine that it's in this particular country. In 1989, they destroyed the wall, and now they are building another wall. I'm thinking about the new wall in Calais also. And all this world of walls, it's scaring me, I must confess. As a journalist, I've always tried to go beyond the statistics and to tell human stories. But now I sometimes doubt about my job, as I see the comments after those kind of stories, the hate comments, and those hate comments such as let them die, let them drown in the seas. I'm shocked, but I also talked with those people, who write those hate comments, and I understand that this hate is nurtured by fear, and we didn't manage to measure this fear. I don't know why, but I guess as a journalist we also have our responsibility. I guess maybe also the politicians didn't measure this fear, and they didn't know how to address this burning issue, which is immigration. So let's be very clear. I don't know tomorrow what will be my work, covering this immigration issue. I don't know how it will be possible to write again about those kind of issues. Sorry, I'm a little bit moved. I will come back to the story of Aham, the pianist. Actually, it's a strange story, and it's a very nice remembrance for me. I first heard about Aham through the internet. So I've seen videos from him playing the piano in Yarmouk in Syria. And actually, before becoming a journalist, I wanted to be a musician, and I was a pianist. And so I was really very stricken and very moved by this guy, playing the piano in Yarmouk, which was totally destroyed. So I was following him on Facebook, and then I heard that his piano was burnt by the Islamic State, and he wanted to flee Syria. And I was trying to get in contact with him, and I knew that he would flee Syria from Turkey to Greece. And I tried to catch him, but I never managed to catch him during the trip when he fled Syria. And I always missed him because as a journalist I went to Lesbos, to Kos, to Hungary, and I've been following all the Balkan roads for other stories, but each time we missed each other, and I was trying to get in contact with him on Facebook, and we never managed to meet either in Turkey or in Greece. So we've been following each other for a few months, and then it was very complicated because he doesn't speak English. So on Facebook we were using Google Translate, and sometimes it was very, very surrealistic. Talking to each other with Google Translate, but somehow we managed to keep in touch. And finally, it was really a miracle to me when he arrived in Germany. We found he was moving each day. He was taking trains, and finally I managed to set up a meeting with him and to go with a translator, and we met in Germany, and finally we didn't need this translator, because I remember when we first met, he was playing the piano, so we played the piano together. So it means that music is like a universal language, and you can share something without sharing the same language. And I remember also this very strong moment. We went to he managed somehow to get me going to the migrant center with other Syrian refugees. It was totally forbidden because as a journalist I was not supposed to go inside this center. But I was like, I'm just listening to his concert, and he improvised the concert with this small electric keyboard, which was with a very bad sound. And he was singing and playing the piano, and then there was all those Syrian refugees, with families, young children and women, and they were dancing, crying and singing in Arabic. And then he told me, okay, Douane, you have to sing and play the piano. So I was like, okay, why not? And I arrived in front of the keyboards, and I didn't know what to sing, so I decided to sing La Bohème from Charles Aznavour, because Charles Aznavour is the singer, and from Armenia, so I thought it would be a good match. But maybe I was a very, very bad singer, and I saw all the audience totally stunned and maybe a little bit terrified by my singing. And then Ehan, which was very kind-hearted, so after my song, he just clapped, and everybody was very polite and saying, "Oh, very nice French song." But it's still to me because it's sometimes very hard to deal with the migration issue, to write about people who drowns, a mother who has lost her daughter, or stories, a tragic story. And this time it was for me the first a positive stories, because there was hope. So now that we are in dark times, I prefer to cling to this story and this very nice remembrance of this day when I was singing, and hopefully singing in front of all those families from Syria who have fled the horror, and we can't even imagine what they have lived through. And I want to thank everybody for honoring me today with this award.
I'm sorry to interrupt your lunch. My minders are telling me we're running over. So it is now my pleasure and privilege to introduce you to Philippe Volopion, who is the Deputy Director for Global Advocacy at Human Rights Watch. He assists in designing and implementing their advocacy strategies worldwide, and in overseeing their advocacy response to crisis situation, which obviously we are in. Prior to joining Human Rights Watch, Philippe spent 5 years working for Le Monde as their UN correspondent. Philippe?
So thank you very much. So it's my pleasure now to introduce the American winners of the prize, David Noriega and John Templon. So David is not there with us, but John is right here. They co-wrote a piece for BuzzFeed, which is about America's crackdown on Indian immigrants. And I think it's a very good example of very good quality journalism done in some of these new media. We are honoring today BuzzFeed and Vice News, and as a former journalist for Le Monde, it's quite telling for me that that's where some of the great journalism is being done right now. My guess is that many of you have had the pleasure of reading the story. It's about a young Indian man named Bhutta Singh from the state of Punjab in India. And the story kind of retraces this crazy journey that he took from Punjab all the way to a detention center in El Paso in Texas, through Suriname and Mexico and a few other countries along the way. And it's a very good example of what Jean-Marie was describing earlier, a real effort to put a human face on these immigration or refugee stories. And what the piece does is, not only give all these rich details about this man's life, how he was essentially persecuted by police in India and forced to flee, but also using data to give a bit of context and document essentially how the US government, the US immigration has been cracking down on young Indian men arriving through Texas in larger number. The piece doesn't say exactly why, but we understand that probably the US is trying to dissuade this route and send a message by detaining a large number of these men. And of course, as other speakers have said, at a time when, both in the US but also in Europe, we have a lot of populist, demagogue politicians who are trying to stoke fears against refugees. This story is a very, very good reminder of the humanity and the hopes and dreams of people who come to our shores. So I'll quickly introduce the two winners. So David Noriega, who is not with us today, but he's on the national desk at BuzzFeed News. He writes on immigration and Islamophobia. So needless to say, he's been very busy over the last few months. He was born himself in Bogota to Colombian and American parents, and he moved to the US as a teenager. He was a pretty good student. He went to Brown University and the Columbia School of Journalism, and he's won another journalism award for a story he wrote on a group that was closely linked to Donald Trump, now the president of the US, and a group who is essentially dedicating its time and energy in publicizing crimes committed by undocumented people. We have also John Templon, who is right here with us. Congratulations, John. So he's an investigative data reporter at BuzzFeed News. Most of his work is in acquiring, cleaning, and analyzing large data sets to unlock investigations. So he's essentially crunching numbers, which doesn't sound very sexy. But when you read the story and when you look at some of the previous work he has done, you really see how it's a new kind of journalism using a new set of tools that can be really enlightening and really interesting. So John, if you wanna come. Before I give the floor to John, I also want to acknowledge the work of Jacob Kushner and Jake Norton. Jake is here with us. They have received the honorable mention of the prize for a piece called On the Run in Vice magazine. So I don't know if anyone has read it, but I read it before coming today. And it's a beautiful piece. It starts with the story of two very young women in love in Uganda, and the piece describes a bit how their lives were shattered by essentially, notorious anti-gay laws in Uganda that forced one of them to flee the country and go to Kenya as a refugee. So Jake, if you want to come and just So John, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone. First, I just wanted to thank French American Foundation and say congratulations to our fellow winners and also the honorable mention. I think they've done some great work. And also my colleague David was hoping to be here today, and he's really sorry he wasn't able to make it. And circumstances just prevented it. But I'll have something from him that he wanted me to say at the end of this. So, as was mentioned, I'm a data journalist at BuzzFeed News, and the genesis of this story really came from analyzing data about detention. And we were originally looking at the detention of Mexican and Latin American immigrants. But through that, we found, surprisingly, that there were a large number of Indian immigrants that were being detained, especially lately by the US government. And as we dug more and more into that rate and talked to more and more people, it seemed that there was actually an issue here that was being unaddressed and undercovered. And so as we got more data and also learned about the arrivals, and we saw the correlation between the arrivals and the detention rate, we realized that this was a story that really needed a face. And my colleague David did a wonderful job of finding Buta and going to him in Washington and learning his story and just weaving a narrative that tied everything we've learned together with this man's story and this incredible journey. Buta is just one person, though. There are so many of these immigrants who are trying to make this trip, and it's a difficult, expensive, and dangerous one. They're coming from India and other places, and it costs tens of thousands of dollars to get here. And I think, Tuesday has already been talked about in this election, but Donald Trump has really promised to change how immigration works in this country, even though it's one of the institutions that make it so rich in culture and in its diversity. And I think there are obviously still injustices that are occurring in the system, and hopefully journalists can continue to find them and point them out, whether that's through data or through beautiful narratives. And combining the two, I think, also hopefully gives us a way of telling, deeper stories that can have more of an impact in the world. And that's from me. And then I just wanted to read a short statement from David as well. David said, "I'm heartbroken that I couldn't be in New York with you today. I'd like to thank the French American Foundation for this award. I'm deeply honored to be in such company. And I want to thank John Templon for being so deft at teasing meaning from inscrutable masses of numbers, and to the editors who saw this story to the finish line, Jeremy Singer-Vine, Adam Sewer, and Mark Schutz. This story is at bottom about the profound incoherence of our immigration enforcement system. Over several decades, our country has relentlessly globalized the flow of capital, information, and technology, and we have worked to internationalize our legal and financial systems to adapt to this change. And yet, when it comes to the flow of human bodies, we have insisted, bafflingly, that it can and should be controlled by a single policy lever operated by a single nation state. This policy lever is especially brutal: prisons and court systems that operate effectively in secret. This contradiction came home to roost on Tuesday night. It's what allowed the brazen manipulation of anger and fear that we must now recognize as politically brilliant, if not exactly innovative. And per usual, its casualties are human bodies that tend toward the ground. In writing this piece, I tried never to lose sight of Buta Singh's body, from the shaking caused by hunger to the feeling of having lost a lifelong head of hair to better hide in a foreign jungle. I think this is one of our many duties in the coming years of near certain darkness, to remember that our work is not only about idea and systems, but also about bodies in pain. Thank you.
I would like to ask all of you to thank the staff of the French-American Foundation, particularly Nathalie Pastin, who has put all this together, organized the awards, and has done an outstanding job for us in this program. Thank you so much.
The president-elect is going to allow to work on
together.